The City of Lights. Paris is filled with iconic landmarks, glorious galleries and incredible food. But not everyone falls in love with the French capital. In fact, some people have been so stressed out by visiting Paris that they have suffered a psychiatric breakdown. A dozen or so Japanese tourists have been repatriated from the French capital in recent years after coming down with what has been labelled Paris syndrome.
So the Paris syndrome has been first recorded about 14 years ago by a Japanese professor in Paris, who basically claims that a number of Japanese tourists who visit France and Paris in particular become unwell and need to be seen by a psychiatrist. So when you go abroad, you have to readapt to a new environment, and with that comes some kind of stress of this new environment, how to navigate there. And for some people that might lead to so-called culture shock.
3 years ago, Dr. Nicholas Gerard at the University of Essex conducted a study into why people suffer culture shocks.
A couple of years ago, we published a study looking at student sojourners, so students going abroad for typically a year. And what we kind of set out to do in that research was to try and see whether they all experience culture shock or not. And we measured stress as kind of an indicator of culture shock, if you like. And what we found is that there are different stress trajectories during their year abroad. But what is quite interesting, and this is only a minority of the people, we have something like 10% who really have a drastic increase of stress. And those are the ones that I would say are the people that experience culture shock.
The study also found that your personality type determined whether you are more susceptible to suffering from culture shock.
So people who are higher in neuroticism are slightly more likely to experience culture shock. Other factors like things like extroversion would help. And if you think about it, that makes sense, because if you're kind of high in extroversion, you might find it easier to get in contact with people while being abroad.
But why Paris in particular? Gerard thinks the prevalence in cases is more because of the large cultural differences between the French and Japanese.
What is significant though is that these are people going from Japan to Paris. There is a theory out there that cultural distance plays a big role. So if you travel to a place that is culturally very different from what you are used to, that will make it harder. And if you think of it, Japan and France are culturally quite different places. They'd be different in maybe superficial things like the food that people eat, but there also be quite different in the kind of values that people have, norms that prevail in these countries, behaviors that people are likely to do, and they are really very different.